Welcome back to Foresight Radio, where we dive deep into the technologies and trends shaping artificial intelligence and the future that it's dragging us towards. I'm Tom Kalopoulos, and today we're tackling a topic that is everywhere lately, artificial superintelligence, or ASI. And more specifically, I want to focus on an often skipped piece of the conversation, alignment. It's the way that ASI might or might not sync with human values. And fair warning at the outset, this is not a hypothetical conversation about ASI as an existential threat. It's about the very real risk of not putting in place the mechanisms by which ASI will fuel our aspirations rather than our annihilation. So spend 5 minutes scanning frontier model papers, press releases, or investor decks lately, and you'll notice a dramatic shift in the AI narrative. The industry seems to have jumped from debating when we'll reach AGI, artificial general intelligence, to speaking as though ASI is now the next logical milestone. And that pivot happened fast. 12 months ago, timelines for AGI dominated AI conversations. And today, OpenAI has cordoned off roughly 1/5 of its compute to solve what it calls the super alignment problem, on a self-imposed 4-year deadline, by the way. At the same time, Google DeepMind's Gemini benchmarks explicitly aim beyond human performance, and Anthropic's Claude 3 Opus already outperforms expert humans across standard reasoning tests. Microsoft, not to be left out meanwhile, is standing up the equivalent of 5 Eagle-class supercomputers every single month to feed the training pipeline for AI. And even Meta is dangling 9-figure packages to poach OpenAI's AI talent. In other words, the industry is treating AGI as the forward, a precursor, and ASI as the opening chapter. AGI is often described as the ultimate polymath. It's an intellectual powerhouse that can slide from diagnosing lymphomas to negotiating a trade deal without losing the thread. Superintelligence, on the other hand, raises that ceiling by an order of magnitude. It has blistering speed plus a depth of abstraction that spots patterns that no individual or group of individuals could detect in 100 lifetimes. At that point, the bottleneck stops being about ideas and it becomes about alignment, which is to say, can we fuse those ideas to human goals before the AI system acts? So what exactly does it mean to have an ASI working with humans? I'll give you 3 examples here. In healthcare, a superintelligence would treat the 3 billion letters of the human genome like a child's coloring book, scanning, annotating, cross-referencing, even proposing genetic edits on the fly. That means that cancers which elude today's immunotherapies could be hunted at the single-cell level, and neurodegenerative disorders could be intercepted years before symptoms even surface. Your annual checkup would no longer feel like a defensive screening and more like a proactive system upgrade, with bespoke molecules being printed on demand. And yet these same tools that perfect therapies can also perfect pathogens, which is why alignment has to reach beyond just machine learning and embed real-time biosurveillance, audit trails, and regulatory circuit breakers. ASI will hold our feet to the fire. It'll call us out on our failures and the friction of the current healthcare system and the bureaucratic mess that contradicts and stands in the way of our promise to deliver health care for all. A second example, climate change. Human-led efforts tend to mop up symptoms, higher seawalls, bigger AC units, better insurance pools. Superintelligence, instead, would aim at root causes. Direct air capture firms like Climeworks already use machine learning and material science to be more aligned with the goals of climate change mitigation. Using ASI, combinatorial searches for new materials that now take years can be compressed into hours, building full-spectrum lifecycle models that would knit extraction, manufacturing, and recycling into a single feedback loop. A third example is energy. At our current rate, data centers alone will require more power by the year 2050 than is projected the entire global grid can generate. An ASI in this case could ingest every turbine, every solar panel, every battery on Earth into one dynamic simulation, anticipating demand weeks or months out, and arbitraging sunlight between hemispheres, driving marginal waste towards zero. One of the most prevalent misconceptions that's worth clearing up is that superintelligence will manifest as a single monolithic AI. What's much more likely is that it will appear as a federation of highly specialized agents. So Imagine one agent being a genomic savant, another being a material chemist, a third being an urban planning maestro, and another being a macroeconomic stabilizer. What's key here is that they'll each speak in a language that allows them to share with one another and continuously retrain themselves on each other's outputs. So picture, if you will, a neural mesh humming in the background of every critical decision. Its only loyalty is to the objectives that we have formally encoded it with. And this arrangement, by the way, creates its own political physics. For example, if a city council proposes a new zoning variance, the urban planning agent can run impact scenarios, but the ethics agent can chime in if the change ratchets up particular exposure in a low-income district. In this future, superintelligence becomes the ultimate fact checker, totally unimpressed by rhetorical sleight of hand, allergic to all sorts of hypocrisy, and armed with exabyte dossiers showing exactly how today's choices will reverberate over the course of the future. And this is why alignment is not just a side topic. It is, in my estimation at least, it's the core engineering task of the next 5 to 10 years. We will need to put in place verifiable constraints, tamper-proof laws, institutional oversight, and a global layer of auditing AIs dedicated to watching the watchers. And you heard that right. AI watching over AI. Why? Because it will just be too hard for humans to keep up. The more power we unlock, the less margin for error we retain. This is like a fighter pilot in a modern fighter jet. You cannot fly it without the assistance of the computers and the technology, and ultimately AI. It's just too sophisticated of a machine, and it responds much too quickly to its environment to allow us to keep up. The hardest part, however, may be the cultural element of this. Values differ vastly across societies, and some of them just flat out conflict with each other. A superintelligence trained on Western notions of individual autonomy might clash directly with the collectivist ethics embedded in an Eastern philosophy. And to be clear here, slowing things down is just not an option. The AI hyperscalers are not slowing down, and there is no global regulation that will cause geographies well outside of our control, think China here, to put the brakes on. Stalling progress cedes advantage to actors with far fewer qualms. A compromise here might be setting up a permanent multinational council that's equipped with transparency tools so that citizens can inspect the reasoning behind every ASI-guided decision. Continuous public scrutiny keeps democracy legitimate and resilient without putting the brakes on progress. Think of this council as an AI-era version of the IPCC for climate change or the IAEA for nuclear energy. A standing cross-border body that mixes technologists, ethicists, industry leaders, and elected officials. It is the job of this council not to micromanage every line of code or slow down innovation, but to keep a real-time, transparent ledger of what superintelligence systems are doing and why they're doing it, and whether those actions match the values and the laws that we've publicly committed to. In short, it's a referee and an instant replay booth rolled into one, making sure that the game moves fast but stays fair. And yes, there will absolutely be geopolitical challenges, but no different than the challenges we face with any other geopolitical objective, whether it be climate change or whether it be managing and controlling nuclear weapons. So what might this future look like? Well, let's jump ahead 3 decades for a concrete taste of a partnership between humans and ASI. Imagine it's 2055 and a zoonotic virus has crossed into humans in northern Thailand. Within an hour of the first confirmed case, domain-specific ASIs in virology and immunology have reconstructed the pathogen's proteome and modeled its antigen drift across 500,000 possible recombinations. And while it's at it, drafted an mRNA vaccine template. A synthetic biology cluster propped up in Nairobi validates the design oversight. And 24 hours in, regional fab plants spin up production of the new mRNA vaccine. Rollout priorities determined by an ethics engine, which is weighing infectious vectors against healthcare capacity and social vulnerability indices. And human public health officials still ultimately make the final call. But in this scenario, ignorance and guesswork have been squeezed entirely out of the timeline. That same week, a Category 6 cyclone is accelerating towards the Bay of Bengal, Climate and logistics agents reroute autonomous cargo drones, pre-stage medical pods, and issue dynamic grid shutdown commands to prevent a cascading series of blackouts. A material science agent, meanwhile, announces a sodium-based battery chemistry that slashes rare earth dependence and can be manufactured on existing lithium-ion lines. Global commodity markets wobble a bit, but an economic stability agent tempers the swing by nudging trading algorithms and publishing transparent intervention logs for auditors to review in real time. At every step, the ASI is calling out our behavior that undercuts any of these stated goals. Officials who delay evacuation to protect party optics, for example, are flagged. Legislators who insert riders to exempt pet industries that they are serving from the emissions caps that are being imposed will see those amendments highlighted in red and complete with a quantified external cost estimate of their actions, the implications of their actions. The public record is, at last, mechanically immune to selective memory. Now, I'm not being Pollyanna-ish. AI will hold our feet to the fire, but it will not make humanity obsolete. That only happens if we abdicate choice by ignoring the safeguards I've already talked about. Ultimately, the role of superintelligence should be to widen our set of options. The role of human judgment, on the other hand, is to choose among those options and take responsibility for the consequences of the option that we choose. Creativity, empathy, moral courage, all these very human traits, none of those can be automated away because their legitimacy rests on being human. What ASI will do is remove the fig leaf of ignorance that we've worn for so long. It will become impossible to claim that we didn't know. The trade-offs of a given policy or the long-term cost of a short-term gain will now be impossible to hide. Accountability in that sense is about to become non-optional. So where does this leave us today? 3 imperatives that I think stand out. First, we need to invest in alignment research at a scale that matches the threat surface. In other words, laboratories need the same social license and oversight that nuclear facilities carry. Second, we need to build governance that can move as fast as capability. And that's going to be a challenge because AI is moving so incredibly fast. But that means transnational treaties. It means crossing borders and attempting to do things on a global scale, independent compute registries, and enforcement, by the way, with teeth that can bite hard enough to deter rogue actors, because we know there will be rogue actors. ASI is just much too attractive of a weapon. Third, we need to teach superintelligence literacy, and this is perhaps the most important piece of it, to anyone who will inherit the consequences of ASI. Students, voters, executives, legislators, across the board. The gap between what is technically possible and what is publicly understood cannot be allowed to continue widening unchecked. The one thing I see most often, which both frightens me and startles me, is how big that gap already is. But if we meet these obligations, the next leap in intelligence, ASI, will amplify our highest aspirations as a species. If we dodge these obligations, we'll find ourselves living under algorithms that see us more clearly than we see ourselves, and which aren't shy about pointing out the discrepancy. That's it for this episode of Foresight Radio. If today's exploration sharpened your view of the road ahead for ASI, share the episode, leave a review, or send it to the colleague who still thinks superintelligence is a comic book plot device. The future doesn't slow down. Our understanding has to speed up. Until next time, keep your focus forward, and remember that progress is a mirror. It shows us not only what we can build, but who we choose to be. And as always, stay curious.